see this now.
Yeah, we can all hear that it's being recorded, and if you're all okay, I think that's about it.
And do you see something on your screens about that?
Yes, it
Okay,
says the meeting is being recorded. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
very good.
So we just have to say okay. I think that's what we have to do. Yeah. Peter, re- would it be possible to record the whole meeting
Well,
or no?
I would be happy to do so if you would like to do that and people agree. I did have someone who asked about that, and it's not what we normally do, but I think it would be lovely in this instance to have the whole meeting. Um,
Yeah, the reason it occurred to me is that I plan to have this be a very interactive meeting because I want to ask questions. I've really been what I've discovered in doing my research is startling. So I want to ask questions and have a discussion, and I thought it would be useful for me to review that later if everybody permits. If not, then it's okay.
well, we will check back with
Yeah.
people, but I think it's a great idea. Um,
Okay.
it's a kind of extension of what I'm going to talk about when I introduce you. Let's talk psychoanalysis. That's what we're going to do today, right?
Okay. Yes, yes, yes,
Absolutely.
yeah. Hi, Alison.
Hey, Allison.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Dr. Aslava is here. Welcome.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hello, hello.
Hi
Hi.
to everyone. Hi.
Marvin is here.
Hi, Aisha.
Hi. Hello.
How are you?
Hello. You?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
Fine, thanks.
Yeah, okay. Good.
We, of course, normally meet in the morning here in the East.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of you making
A
the
pleasure.
change.
There's Bess coming on, yeah. Hey,
Hi.
Hey, she.
I think as you
I'm,
join the meeting, you see that we're recording today. Is that
yes.
right? So everyone by joining the meeting has consented. I hope it won't cause too many people to change their minds. I'm going to wait just another couple of minutes before we
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
proceed. Now, will we have other colleagues from the Colombian Society with us this afternoon?
Maybe yes, but as we are just finishing our vacation period,
Yes.
they have been with difficulties to connect not only to
Okay.
Zoom but also the brain.
Oh,
Of course. Of
Mhm.
course. And I'm wondering, hi, John.
hi. Hello, John.
Hi,
Uh,
John.
Hi,
Hey, good to see you.
it's my phone to my computer here. So,
Okay.
And I've never recorded a meeting before. I just wondered, does it record the speaker or does it record everyone in attending the meeting? I have no idea how that works.
Everyone
So,
attending.
so we're all on all the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It'll record
Okay.
the whole.
Good to know. Well, I think psychoanalysts are supposed to be punctual. It's not always been one of my best qualities, but
I'm,
yeah, failed that test a long time ago.
yeah.
oh my goodness, I'm so glad to hear both of you talk about that. I used to be on the dot, and then something happened 5 years ago. I don't know if my brown blood started rebelling or what. And I told my patients, I said, I can't do this anymore, seriously. Maybe I should be like Winnicott and just say, we'll meet somewhere between 9 and 10, my altered version of Winnicott.
Well, that could be a slippery slope.
I know, I know.
Well, welcome everyone. This is, of course, the first meeting of our 2026 calendar. I'm delighted to have as a speaker today our own Aisha Abbasi, whose topic is transference, countertransference, and transformation, exploring the dynamics of the analyst relocation. And we are today having our first annual memorial lecture in honor of Horacio Arias. And I think the topic of your presentation is perfectly suited to our occasion because, of course, Horacio himself relocated not only from Colombia to the United States, but several times within this country. And I think we'll hear a little bit more about that. We're very pleased and grateful to our guests, Henry Wareham, representing the family, Horacio's nephew, currently on a cruise in the Caribbean, but able to join us via Wi-Fi. We're pleased to see you, Henry, honestly, and you'll tell us something about your personal connection to Uncle Horacio. And then we have representing the Colombian Psychoanalytic Society, Fabio Estrada Sharon, whom I had the pleasure of meeting at the Congress in Lisbon, and he will tell us about Horacio in the context of the that where he did his training, not only in psychiatry but in psychoanalysis. Originally, we
Your
were.
sound is a little muffled.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Your
I
sound is
think
a little muffled. It
My
usually
goodness.
isn't.
Okay. Okay. I don't know what I can do. I've got my volume.
Maybe
Is
because
it
of
better now?
recording.
It might help to mute all. I'm not sure, but maybe
I can do that. Yes. That may
maybe
be
that's
just okay. I'll be
and maybe to move a little bit closer or move the
uh,
computer a little bit closer, Peter.
thank you for telling me. Let me just see here.
Now it's good. I think it's when you move sideways that the
Yeah.
voice.
Ah,
The microphones are a bit more sensitive than you might think, and so it does matter if you move in closer.
okay. I'm trying to see about the muting function here. But if I could just get, normally I think it's possible for me to mute and then unmute people individually. I'm not seeing that here.
You can mute us all, but you can't unmute us. We have to do that.
We can
Maybe
mute.
maybe we should all mute, so I will do that.
If you would be kind enough. Okay, so we can, thank you, everyone. Okay, so sorry for the technical difficulties. But thanks for letting me know that it wasn't coming through very clearly. I'm not going to repeat what I've already said. Uh, so today we will record the entire meeting. At Aisha's request and by common agreement, we're going to have a free-flowing discussion, and she thinks that she might learn something from the experience. So let's go ahead and do that. And before I introduce briefly our guests, as I just started to do, actually, some business for the society. You saw the letter, if you're a member of our TBIPS group, that I sent out, having to do above all with the sad news of the death of Elise Snyder on the 10th of January at the age of 91. She was our representative for many years on the board of APSA, as well as the founder and dynamo behind the China American Psychoanalytic Alliance, loved and known by many people, perhaps controversial in some quarters because her attempt to bring psychoanalysis to China was not entirely in line with the views of the IPA, but it's been a great success. And her death is a great loss for us here in Tampa and for psychoanalysis. After the death of Elise Snyder, Judy Logue who had previously agreed to take over as our alternate representative to the board when Aisha felt it was just one more administrative duty having to do with politics primarily that I guess one only can take in certain limited doses, stepped aside, and Judy agreed to become our alternate and now has become our representative on the board. And then Judy and I gently twisted Andrea Korn's arm, and she has agreed to become our new alternate. So we're all, all the slots are filled, and we couldn't be more pleased and grateful to you for taking this on. Okay. Elise, as you may know, was the person through whom we came in contact with Susie Pafka, and she was a gift from Elise to TBIPS, and because Susie herself was on leave for medical reasons last year, we had to postpone John Auerbach's talk, until the spring, and it brought home to me how dependent we are on Susie, on our administrators. Presidents come and go, but administrators, executive directors, and all of that's what makes an organization run. Okay. And so I realize how little I really know about all the things that we have to do to be in good standing with APSA, with the state of Florida, the IRS, and so forth and so on. I thought we should have a backup for Susie. And I posted an announcement on the administrators list of APSA to see if anyone would volunteer or wish to join us in that role. And so we were very fortunate to have Darcy Schatz. She was the first one who jumped on it right away. And she is the administrative director of the Cleveland Psychoanalytic Center. And she's a specialist in nonprofits, really. She has a small business of her own, working with psychoanalytic organizations, with the Association for Child Psychoanalysis. And so she is now our co-administrator. And so I think Susie and Darcy will make a great team. And I want to also acknowledge Harold's role as our treasurer, who recently bailed us out of getting into deep trouble with the IRS by finding out that we do have, I think, a tax-exempt certificate, right? Okay, so thanks to you for all of that. And Darcy is helping us create a listserv for our members, so that if we have requests for referrals or internal business, that we can contact each other as a group rather than having to ask Susie, for example, to post on our wild apricot list to communicate. So that should be up and running fairly soon. Now, this lecture, which is in honor of Horacio Arias, our past president and beloved former member, is only one of the two ventures that we've been able to launch thanks to his generosity. The other is the scholarship program that we have a budget for, a sort of resource for. And essentially what we would like to do is support our members who are doing coursework at institutes of APSA or the IPA, whether it's for analytic training, psychotherapy training, independent learning, but it has to be, through the institutes of APSA or the IPA. And we would like people to have been members for 2 years of our society to be eligible. But since we are national and international, anyone from anywhere who joins TBIPS is eligible. So just be in touch if that is of interest to you or you.
Not TBIPS. TBIPS is the institute. TBPS.
Well, I don't think TBIPS with the I has a monopoly on TBIPS. Okay, we are TBIPS. You are TBIPS. Okay.
Oh, okay. You might say TBAPS for the Bay, Tampa Bay, but okay.
Well, okay. So in any case, we are the society. Yes, and it is a bit ambiguous, I understand. But I don't know what else to say. So I've always said TBIPS for us. So just the Arias scholarship is something else that you are aware of, and please do keep in mind. Now, I mentioned in my letter that we're soliciting your suggestions for speakers for the coming year, 26, 27. I know a few of you have written to me, and just don't hesitate to write to me again because I do want your suggestions. And I haven't kept track very closely of those names. So please let me know if you have ideas, including for the Arias lecture next year around this time. So just to briefly summarize our future meetings, we have on the 21st of February, Dion Powell, on transgenerational racial trauma, becoming raced. Then on the 21st of March, Anthony Bass from the Ferenczi Center and IARP. His talk is on analytic change and the changing therapist. Then rescheduled from the fall because of Susie's illness, John Auerbach's talk will be held on the 11th of April on the title God Said to Abraham, The Binding of Isaac Revisited. And then our final speaker of this year on the 9th of May is Caroline Sehan of the International Psychotherapy Institute on Ghosts in the Consulting Room, Hearing the Nursery Echo in Adult Analysis. And as you may remember from the letter I sent out, Caroline very generously has shared with me and therefore with all of us the link to her vast library of free books on psychotherapy that Jacob Aronson, the well-known, Jason Aronson, the well-known publisher, shared with TBIPS, with the IPI. And so it's an online resource that you have the link to. And there's so many great books on there. And just after I shared that with you, we learned of the death of Jason Aronson, actually, right after I wrote to you, at the age of 97. So keep that in mind. Now, turning to Horacio, those of you who've been longtime members of the society will know and remember him well. If I hold up a picture of him, can you see this here? It's kind of, does that look clear enough? Is that in the picture? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So Horacio was born on the 1st of May in 1924 in Medellin, Colombia, and died on the 23rd of January in Tampa of 2021. So our lecture today is intended to be close in time to the date of his passing, and I think we should hold the January meeting every year for our Arias lecture. As I mentioned, he did his psychoanalytic training, and before that, his undergraduate and medical degrees in psychiatry in Colombia. He he came to Tampa in 1977, but previously, after having lived in Colombia, he came to St. Louis and Tampa, and interestingly, he met his wife Shirley, who I guess must be Henry, your aunt, right? Your mom's
Correct. My father's sister.
Father's sister, the Wareham family. Okay.
Yeah.
So Horacio met Shirley on a plane, I gather. Okay. And they were married for, I don't know, 50 plus, how many years?
I think it was 51 years.
51 years. So that's a true love story.
Yeah.
And on the website that commemorates his passing, there are some beautiful tributes I thought I could share just from people that knew him as patients or colleagues, friends. So here's someone who wrote. His name is Daniel Consuegra. I was Dr. Arias's patient for 35 years. I greatly miss Dr. Arias. He had a great deal of intellectual and spiritual depth. Dr. Arias dug deep, and the result was a real change. He fostered trust. Dr. Arias was kind, empathetic, and able to show his human side. He could also be tough, but always connected. He was not perfect. unlike the rest of us, of course, right? But a very good analyst. He showed his feelings and told stories about his life. He had a good sense of humor. He was a giving person. And then someone named Cecilia Laud says, I was, as an RN, working at Memorial Hospital for many years. I had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Arias. He was kind and respectful to all the other doctors, his patients, and nurses, even when I had to call him in the middle of the night for orders. I have so much respect for how hard he worked and how dedicated he was to his patients. I feel so sad to hear of his passing because it feels like the end of an era. It feels like a library of valuable books is gone forever, and I gather Horacio had a magnificent library indeed. However, his memory will live on in the hearts of those who knew him. My deepest condolences to the family. So I think we all feel his passing. Those of us who knew him or just are now in his debt for his generosity. And now, Henry, I'd like to invite you to share some thoughts on behalf of the family.
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter. It's an honor and a pleasure to participate and speak to you, your team, and our guest speaker, Aisha. Can you hear me all okay?
Much better than you could hear me, I think.
Okay. I was trying to find a quiet spot on a cruise ship, and that's not easy. Our room Wi-Fi was not great, so I'm in a relatively quiet location. So, hello to the Tampa Bay Psychoanalytic Society, and welcome to today's special presentation by Aisha. The lecture is, as Peter mentioned, is named for our uncle, Uncle Horacio, who was a longtime member, active member of your society. So I'd like to thank the society and Peter for inviting me to say a few words about our uncle. I learned about Uncle Horacio's love for psychiatry, but his passion for psychoanalysis as a young boy, growing up in Cleveland, Ohio. Uncle Horacio, as Peter mentioned, was married to my father's sister, Shirley, for 50 plus years, 51 years, I believe. And we would stay very close in contact with them throughout the year, no matter where they were living. They started off living near Boston, or Boston, as some might say, out that way. And that was great. And then they took us to see all the historical sites. And as Peter mentioned, they moved to Tampa in 77. We usually spent Christmas each year with Shirley and Horacio, either in Tampa or in Ohio. Then I grew up in the Cleveland area. Horacio very much enjoyed caring for his general psychiatry patients, but his true passion was caring for his psychoanalysis patients. I got to know several of his psychoanalysis patients by their first name during my many visits to Tampa to Horacio and Shirley's office. It was clear that there was a great appreciation of Dr. Arias's care for those patients, and they would frequently praise him and explain how grateful they were for his care. And some were cared for, as Peter said, for decades, 1, 2, 3, or more, 3 decades. That was fantastic. Horacio was a voracious reader and had an extensive library of books at his home, as Peter mentioned. His favorite books were those that dealt with topics involving psychoanalysis. Horacio and Shirley traveled extensively and would often relate highlights of their visits to other countries. One of the highlights that I recall most clearly that Horacio relayed to me was that during one of their trips, Horacio had the opportunity to stand in the same exact spot at a lectern that was utilized for a lecture by Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud had delivered a lecture to the learners, his audience, at that spot, and Horacio made it clear that he stood on that spot, and that was very important to him. Be right back. He was so happy about that.
Oh,
So happy.
So meaningful. Yeah.
Of course, he explained to me that Sigmund Freud was the founder of psychoanalysis and that he was revered and admired by Horacio. I know that Uncle Horacio loved and respected each of you and the society. The letters get smaller as you get a little bit older. He
Oh,
was thrilled to serve as your society president. In closing, let me say that I'd like to thank you, the society, and especially Peter, for inviting me to join you today, and I appreciate your time very much. I'll turn things back over to Peter. Thank you.
thank you so much, Henry. It's very beautiful and moving to hear your deep love and respect for your uncle Horacio, whom you shared with
Thank you.
generously. I should have mentioned in
Thank you for the chance.
of course, you are not obligated to stay for the entire society scientific meeting, but we have a few more people speaking about Horacio, and please
Of course.
feel free to join us for as long as you're able to and wish
Sure
to.
will. Have
Well, I just
a
want
great lecture and a great day.
well, I just wanted to
Thank
tell everyone here that you are one of the three nephews of Shirley and Horacio and one niece, right? So there was
Correct.
four of you, and all of you now. I guess you grew up in Cleveland. Everyone is still in Ohio, and you're in Columbus.
Right.
Okay.
We were like their children because they didn't have children. So
Well,
they were at weddings, at graduations. They were omnipresent as we grew up.
well,
Like a second father and a second mother.
well, you were lucky, and so were they, of course. And so you're in private practice as an internist and nephrologist, and you love teaching your medical students and residents. And
Correct.
as I did say earlier, you are, of course, taking time out from your cruise with your family. So
More than happy.
thanks again for making your
My pleasure. Thank you.
joining us. So now I turn to Dr. Eslava. I also believe we have other guests from Colombia, from the society. Am I right? Dr. Garcia Monteleano, is that correct? And you're all welcome here. But as I said, Dr. Eslava Saron is the president of the Colombian Society, psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and I will be very honored if you could share some remarks about Horacio and psychoanalysis in Colombia.
Well, thank you, Peter. First of all, I'm very grateful for your invitation. And thank you, Henry, for your moving statement about Horacio.
My pleasure.
I met personally Horacio. I will read something I already sent to Peter, but it looks like I met personally Horacio at the Chicago Congress of the IPA, but I always, during my formation, was aware of his affective bond to my teachers and senior colleagues of our group, owing to which he supported the academic progress of our candidates and members. His very close friends, now deceased, were with him pioneers of psychoanalysis in Colombia. In fact, they were the second generation of psychoanalysts formed in Colombia. Horacio witnessed and participated in the beginning of the original analytic group in 1962. Since then, he always offered his best efforts to the progress of our discipline in Bogota, not only by facilitating our access to the North American development of psychoanalysis, but also by fostering the creation of Silverman's Fund dedicated to offer loans to our candidates, and lately, through a significantly economic legacy. Our association, represented here by me, has nothing but gratitude to Horacio. We also count today with the presence of a colleague, Henry Garcia, another Henry, who had the opportunity to meet Horacio many times when he came to Colombia visiting his father, also psychoanalyst, and also Henry. So I wish all my colleagues in the Colombian Association could be able to see this recording in the future.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Peter.
And I would like to invite Dr. Garcia, if you would like to share some words about your personal connection to Dr. Arias.
Yes.
Okay. Could turn back the camera so we see you if it's possible. There we are.
Yeah, the camera is open. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes. First of all, I apologize. I was driving in a very, very dark and heavy traffic. My English is not so good. I needed 3 days because my brain learned English from French. Then, if I speak with a French accent, I can speak better. But I think it's like a false self. Then I prefer to speak slowly. When I was young, I think 1977, because I went to school. Horacio and Shirley, when he came to Bogota, he visit always my father. My father is too from a region near to Medellin. He's from Pereira. He's, I think, a cultural place called in Colombia Paisas. If you came to Colombia, it's very nice to visit the Paisa cultures. And Chile, I think Professor Horacio don't have chills. Yes? No.
No.
Then they treat us, me and my two brothers, like sons. Always he arrive with a lot of gift. I remember, perhaps some of you, like me, we remember the spherograph. It was amazing. It was a kind of circles to do geometric forms, etc., or some gift from the United States. He was near to my father. They speak, they log, they take whiskey. And always we are invited to see Chile. Chile was very nice, but very, I don't know, timid, or perhaps you see Latino American culture is in some kind of manner different. You don't express in America the feels, and you don't are scandalous, I think. But I remember always Horacio, when you show us the picture, it was very, very emocionante. Profe Slava está ahí. Emocionante is impressive, is very, ¿cómo se dice, Martí? Exciting to see and to remember then 50 years ago, 45, 60, 50 years ago.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
That's really beautiful. Lovely memories, yeah.
And I see Dr. Margarita Alvarez is here also. Would you like?
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you. And I hope will lead to a closer connection between our society and the Colombian society. That would be a tribute to Horacio, wouldn't it? So
Yes.
would you like to share any thoughts with us today?
Who?
You.
Margarita, you.
You're not required. I just invite you if you have anything you wish to say to us.
Well, I didn't know Horacio. So I'm just very curious about his memories, his contributions, and I'm going to learn about that.
Okay.
today, but I'm very curious about you and all the work you've done on Sandor Ferenczi.
Well, thank you very much. That's a topic for perhaps a different meeting.
That would be great.
Okay. Well, I think we can say that Horacio was very much influenced in the Kleinian tradition of psychoanalysis, predominantly, right? I usually imagine Kleinians to be rather fierce people. You know, but Horacio was so gentle, so kind, so benevolent to all of us, right? So I guess his patients got the best of his theoretical perspective and his human warmth. I mean, that's what I would say about him, most of all. But we also want to honor him on behalf of the Tampa Bay Society. Henry, please. You're muted. I'm sorry. Could you unmute?
Yes, I'm here. Mm-hmm.
No, I'm sorry. Henry Garcia.
Yes, yes,
sorry.
yes. Yes, sir. Because
Two Enrique's here.
Yes.
yes, that you said is true. I remember Horacio logging and very generous when he arrives with gift. Is not a little gift. Is what the big gift. And in the Colombian Psychoanalytic Association, he give to us the opportunity of have becas birth, Martí. Becas.
Scholarship.
Perdón, Professor Lava?
Scholarships.
Yes, scholarships for help young psychoanalysts. Professor Horacio, when I was in the association, I like treasurer. When Dr. Islava tell to us that Horacio Arias give a lot of money to help young psychoanalysts, then I was is amazing. Is el sello profe is the firm, the signature of Horacio Arias, the generosity and yes.
Well, when we established our Horacio Arias Scholarship, I didn't know that he had done something already like this with the Colombian Association. So it really is nice to hear about that, how much he's done for both societies and for psychoanalysis. We have our own Licia Alexandra Guerra, who will honor Horacio's memory on behalf of the Tampa Bay Society.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to remember my old friend with all of you. Horacio Arias was my friend, and much like a possible namesake, Shakespeare's Horatio in Hamlet, Horacio was a faithful and dedicated friend and one with wise counsel too. To me, he was also kind of a father figure whose unfailing support of me was much like my own father's had been. So after the death of my father, it was nice to have Horacio. Horacio also had an unflagging support for both the Tampa Bay Psychoanalytic Society, having served as its president decades ago, and for the Tampa Bay Institute of Psychoanalytic Studies, or TBIPS, where he was one of its founding members. He faithfully attended both organizations' many board meetings, and he taught at TBIPS, and having trained in Colombia, South America, he was the Institute's go-to Kleinian. Decades before Bryan Stevenson, the Alabama attorney who founded the Equal Justice Initiative and legally counseled incarcerated people on death row for murder. And Bryan Stevenson said, each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. And Horacio knew this very well and taught a very valuable lesson from his Kleinian training, and that was to not mistake the part for the whole, the splitting of the paranoid schizoid position. And when TBIPS had a split in January 2008, it reverberated in the society, and many people, perhaps not being able to refrain from mistaking the part for the whole, later resigned from both organizations. And I took over the helm of the society that year in May 2008, and it was a very tough time for the society. But Horacio always stood by the society and by me, a concrete reminder of someone who did not mistake the part for the whole. His faithful presence at society and institute board meetings, and in the early days, TBIBs met weekly as a board to lay out all the plans for the institute. But his faithful presence served to remind me of the lesson about not mistaking the part for the whole through all the picadillos and irritations and aggravations that accompany navigating the politics that plague any organization's boardrooms. I met Horacio in 1996 when he was already about 72 years old and got to know him and his wife Shirley at the society's monthly dinners that were held before each speaker meeting on Friday night before the Saturday meeting. And those were, of course, the days before COVID. And he likewise faithfully attended all the dinners. Sometimes we even carpooled together. And his old Mercedes, though it was built like a tank, I always felt I was taking my life into my hands when I got into his car because he was a fast and scary driver. And, I wonder when soon if I will be driving when I'm in my later 70s. He and I started having weekly lunches together after Shirley died in December 2010. And it's true, they were married for over 50 years. And I will say, she adored him up until the very last. She just adored Horacio. And at those lunches, I learned Horacio had a great sense of humor and he liked to laugh. At society meetings, he was mostly quiet. And in his later years, sometimes he seemed to be dozing, but he was always, always aware of everything that was going on around him. And while one would not say that he was a man who could be accused of liking to hear himself talk, when he spoke, it was always salient. But he had a very thick accent, and I'd become accustomed to its exposure over many years. And so people would look to me to restate what it was that Horacio had said to the group. And I hope I did him justice in the restating. People also had marveled over the years at his seemingly unflagging energy, his ability to attend all those board meetings and speaker meetings and dinners and teach at TBIPs and have a busy practice at 96 years of age. He was doing all of these things till the end. But I would say that Horacio's legacy is not money, but love. And he loved in this way, and I'm going to quote a colleague of mine on love because it reminded me of the way that Horacio loved. So I'm going to be reading this part. She says, from the relational perspective, quote, in organizational life, love is not agreement or sameness. It is the disciplined effort to understand another position, another mind, another experience, even when it diverges sharply from our own. Not innocence or bliss, but commitment in the presence of ambivalence. Love as steadiness under strain. Love as an ethical stance that keeps repair and a better future alive and possible. Love understood not as consensus or comfort, but as an ethical commitment to understanding, containment, and repair in the face of inevitable tension. And that is how Horacio loved. Thank you.
Aisha, that's a eloquent, heartfelt tribute that embodies so much about Horacio and I think about psychoanalysis at its best. And let's all strive to live by those great words and his example. So we're now going to transition into the scientific, as it were, portion of our meeting. And I'd like to introduce our speaker, Aisha Abbasi, who to me is my idea of a psychoanalyst. The words that come to mind include deep, kind, rigorous, always clinical, always open to hearing what others have to say and to thinking about things from multiple perspectives. Aisha graduated from medical school in Lahore, Pakistan, moved to this country with her husband Amer in 1987, trained as a psychiatrist, I believe, and psychoanalyst in Michigan, where she lived for many years at the Michigan Psychoanalytic Institute, and only a few years ago relocated again out to Portland, Oregon, to be with her children and her family more closely. Aisha is the author of this outstanding book, The Rupture of Serenity, External Intrusions and Psychoanalytic Technique, which I love and encourage you to read. And she's the author of a book of poetry in Urdu called The World Within. Was it translated into English or just published in this country? It was published.
About 10 poems were translated by a Professor Carlo Coppola in Michigan, and many of them were published in TAP, the American Psychoanalyst, the magazine.
Okay, so you are a poet in your native Urdu and also a great contributor to psychoanalysis.
Translated, yeah.
A member, among other things, of the board of directors of the Psychoanalytic Quarterly. I won't recite all the affiliations, but I will mention that you recently founded this supportive online learning community called Let's Talk Psychoanalysis, which I have joined and encourage others to check out and join. It has many programs and activities, and you describe this as a place where curiosity meets expertise. And there are seminars, learning opportunities of all kinds, that interviews, etc., introductions to authors. And so currently there's a course in process called Creating the Therapeutic Pathway. And you can just go to the website and find out more about that. When we start our meetings, normally without all the time that we've dedicated quite properly to paying tribute to Horacio, I always want guests and first-time attendees, visitors, to join and say hello, say a few words. I believe Dr. Marvin Logal might be visiting us from Michigan. Is that right? Would I be wrong in thinking that? Welcome. You're muted. If you wouldn't mind just saying hello for a moment and telling us a bit more.
Hi, thank you for welcoming me. I am in Naples.
Naples, Florida.
Naples, oh yeah.
Okay.
And I was in Minneapolis for 3.5 decades, moved to Miami 8 years ago, was there and part of the Florida Psychoanalytic Center, president of the center actually, and moved to Naples last summer. So I've joined Tampa Bay Psychoanalytic Society, and
that's great.
Pleased to meet you all.
Well, we're great.
Wonderful.
Welcome, welcome. You know, we do allow members of the Florida Center to also be members of TBIPS. Aisha is a supervising analyst, right, for a Florida Center, but we claim her as our own. So great to have you.
Thank you. Aisha and I've actually shared supervision of a Minneapolis candidate.
Okay.
So we've worked together previously.
All right.
That fits in so well with what we are going to discuss today, doesn't it, Marvin?
Yes.
Peter, right? Yeah.
Sure does.
Movements, yeah.
And Maria, of course, I always want to greet you because you're coming to us from Edinburgh, and you truly show how international we are and how, you know, how much we are enriched by the presence of people, not only from the country but around the world. And is there
Sorry, who's that, Peter?
This is Maria Falzone here. She's
hi. Okay.
Yes.
Hello, I'm in Scotland.
Oh, that's lovely. Where in Scotland? Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, yeah.
Okay.
And I believe everyone else is except for our guest from Colombia today, people that we know from other meetings. And so why don't I just invite you, Aisha, to begin your presentation, and we'll just let it go, and whatever way that you would like, I know we want to have plenty of time for discussion as we go. So
Yes.
we'll take a break somewhere halfway through. And I guess that could be for us now, what, about 3 o'clock Eastern time. So let's get going.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. And I am so truly, deeply honored to be the first analyst to give a lecture named after Horacio Arias. And Henry, it was so lovely to hear from you. And Henry Garcia, I think he left. But
My pleasure.
yeah, and the memories and the legacy that you described that Horacio has left behind, I think is really the most important part of a human being's life, and certainly an analyst's life. So thank you. I'm really glad I was privy to that. Deepest thanks to Peter and to all of you who selected me to speak today. And I decided that I am going to speak differently today than, which I'm more and more, the way I present has changed over the years. I'm not going to read formally. I have points, but what I really want us to do is, as I present certain ideas, I will stop and I want to ask right at the outset, how many people of the 12, 15, whatever we have here, how many therapists and analysts do we have here today who have experienced relocation? And if so, how many times? So if we could go around the group and have people talk about it, this is part of why I asked Peter if he could record the meeting, because it is the most astonishing thing I discovered in the preparing of this paper, and it is going to become a formal paper, was what is repeatedly referred to in the literature as an extreme paucity of literature on the topic of the relocation of the analyst. I was totally blown away. I thought I would open PepWeb and I would find hundreds of references. There were 23. And of the 23, many had to do with losing an analyst through death or because the analyst had been thrown out of a society or institute. So if you pare them down, there are even less than 23 that have to do with actual relocation. Secondly, what is very important that I discovered in doing the literature review is all of the papers predate COVID. Mm-hmm. And the ones that have to do with actual relocation all refer to analysts who relocated and therefore had to close practices. Then there are a few more recent papers, still pre-COVID, that refer to analysts who moved and continued to see their patients on Skype. So those are more about, the focus in those papers is more about Skype and teleanalysis, which now, of course, we have tons of papers about. So what to me is very interesting is that even though we know that many analysts relocated during COVID and after COVID because it made movement easier, as many of us shifted to doing a lot of online treatment, there is no published paper on the analyst relocation after COVID. Okay. So I'm definitely going to submit this paper. And what my hope is, as we talk today, if people have anecdotes and experiences to share, I would be more than happy to make this a paper that is co-authored by many people. Okay, so that is really an invitation I'm putting out today. And that's why I said, let's record this material so that we can have the material on record and we know who it is, whose material it is. And if anyone is interested in co-authoring this paper, even if it's 7 people, I think that would be lovely. And it would be a lovely thing to come out of the Tampa Bay Psychoanalytic Society, and a lovely way to honor the memory of Dr. Arias.
That's lovely.
So
Well, I think
that
I think you would have to be the first author.
say that again.
I'm sorry, you would have to be the first author, right? As they do in these
Yes, yes,
laboratory
yes,
for,
yes.
everybody finds
I
out.
would be the first author, but I would love for us to be able to document,
Okay.
the experiences of many in this group who have relocated. I know many times, and especially post-COVID.
Yeah, and when you explain what you're really asking about, it's not simply people who, in the course of their lives, have moved from one place to another. That's outside the framework of your specific focus. It's
No, I am asking about that too, Peter, because there is
okay.
so little written about it.
Oh, but
That
above all, I think it's really people who have relocated their clinical practice, right?
Yes,
Not
yes,
not simply, oh, I grew up in this place and then I moved to that place in the course of my life. That's not so directly relevant
yes.
to your focus.
Not so directly relevant, although of course as I go on, I'll talk to you about how when I talk about, countertransferences evoked by relocation,
Yes,
that I had to really think about all the relocations in my life.
right.
Because as you know, they all impinge upon and inform how the most current relocation affects us,
Well, I
right?
wonder if we could invite anyone here who's had such an experience
Yes.
to be the second author or the first to sign.
Yeah.
Please.
Don't even worry
Oh,
about that right now.
I
If
know.
we could go around the room and we can, go in any order that you want, that it would be lovely to hear about people who've relocated clinical practices pre-COVID, during COVID, or after COVID. And what were your experiences? I'd like us to start with that.
Leisha, you're first. I think we're a nice, intimate, smaller group that,
Yes.
while it's convenient to use the raise hand feature, it's not required. So if you just feel that it's a moment to join the conversation, please go right ahead. But we'll
Exactly.
start with Leisha.
Okay, I have two examples of relocation. Uh, I'm a native of Florida, and I went to New York for my psychoanalytic training, where I was for 8 years. And I had 5 analytic cases through my training, 4 or 5 times a week, each and every one. And when I decided to return to Florida, when I completed my training, I gave all my patients only about 6 months' notice that I was leaving. But the patient that I had seen on the couch the longest for 7 years decided when I told him he was no longer going to pay his fee, and he did not pay me for 6 months. And of course, I had Charles Brenner supervising the case, and he was like letter of the law kind of guy. And he wanted me to interpret. The guy did not pay me by the time I left, so I had to sue his ass, and then I got paid.
Sorry, you had to do what, Keisha?
Sue him, take him to
Okay.
court,
Yeah.
which he countered with a malpractice suit, but that was thrown out immediately because it could see that it was a retaliatory suit. But then when I was in Florida, I saw, as an analyst, and I saw a lot of children. I had a big playroom where I saw many, many children. And after COVID came, I decided to sell my office building and only see people by Zoom. Well, you can't really see young children by Zoom. So that was the second relocation, if you will, having to give up seeing children. However, many of their parents continued to see me. And in fact, God, we've been past COVID now, five years, 6 years. And I still see a couple of those parents to advise them, I guess, on their children and to talk about their children together. That was another adjustment,
Yes.
relocation I made, more from presence in the room to
Yes.
Zoom. Sounds
which is,
another relocation.
yes, which is a relocation, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Go ahead, John.
Really,
Sure. Let me lower hand here. Okay, I'm going to try to get this condensed down. I've lived a lot of different places. I am originally from suburban Long Island, from a community that was 75% Jewish. And to this day, my belief is that the demographic core of psychoanalysis, at least in the United States, is filled with smart Jewish kids from New York, and we're everywhere, who somehow wake up and think, we don't belong here. What are we doing here? So the issue of relocation is in the core of a large demographic of people who are interested in psychoanalysis. So I did my university, I did my graduate school, and I wound up completing my degree in New Haven, Connecticut, though the degree is from SUNY Buffalo. And I was in New Haven for a long time, never really established a therapy practice there because the last thing that's needed in New Haven is yet another Jewish male psychoanalytically oriented psychotherapist with an obsessional character structure. Those are almost as common as smart Jewish kids on every corner in the New York City metropolitan area. So I never did that and didn't. I had a practice in psychological testing and didn't set up a practice till I moved to East Tennessee, which now meant moving from a place where my ethnicity is as visible as skin color, because that's just how it is if you're in New York or New Haven, and isn't given a second thought by anyone, to Johnson City, where I'm doing now finally a practice with people who have no idea who or what I am, except that y'all ain't from around here. And to the extent that they can figure it out, then you start getting really interesting transferences. Because if you're in East Tennessee, then basically there's not much anti-Semitism. The attitude toward Jews is this weird combination of reverence for God's chosen people, combined with a total incomprehension for the nature of the religion and the ethnicity. And so, more or less, it's just assumed that we're just a benighted group of people who haven't yet found our savior. So, a lot of the drama inside of every psychotherapy was which people could figure out who they were talking to and why they could. Usually, it's people who were from outside, had been outside the area for a while, and had strange degrees of alienation from the culture they were in, such that they were having troubles making it fit. When that finally ended, when I moved to uh, North Florida, to Gainesville, which I was in for about a decade or so, then that particular strangeness left my psychotherapy. Oh, by the way, it was then that I moved my entire practice to what was then Skype, now Zoom.
okay.
And every single patient, even being told, okay, I cannot give you any insurance. The laws about how this all works right now are sketchy, and I cannot see you face to face in person. I will be glad to refer you to someone in the area, knowing that there'd be no one who worked the way I did, uh, left in East Tennessee, or there were a couple of people who did. Every single one of those people elected to continue with me. I'm still seeing two of them. We're now more than a decade later. But from that, I learned to never underestimate the power of what the connection is. That this is the
Yes.
most important thing we sell, our humanity and our connection to other people. After that, we argue about theoretical stuff. But if that person thinks this woman, this man, this person is with me, is connected to me, and sees my humanity, they'll stay with you.
Yes.
And so now I'm in South Florida. Moving to South Florida meant returning to a land that looks a lot like New York, just the ethnic mix is a little different, but it's pretty much the same. But now specifically, I'm in Boynton Beach, which is now a community that's about 75% Jewish. And now I have the experience of I'm treating people who seem demographically a lot like me, and I resemble demographically everyone around me. And no one has any idea, because they have no idea of my inner life, that I look like I'm you, but I'm not you. And I have spent much of my time adapting to the alienation I felt from the culture from which I came. The times when I don't feel it are when I'm at my university job, because the sampling of, it's the same ethnic mix as the rest of South Florida, but the sampling, therefore, of the overrepresentation of Jews are the same group of people who didn't really fit in their 75% Jewish communities in the New York metro area. And so here I am and think of myself as deeply involved in this kind of spirituality. I've got much deeper into it as a result of being in East Tennessee, simply to protect myself from my well-meaning neighbors. And so this still now remains a major part of what happens inside of the dialogue I might have with anyone.
John,
So
can I ask you
I'll
something?
stop there. I'll stop there.
Yeah, can I ask you something, John?
Yeah.
Because when you're speaking, it makes me think not only about the physical geographic translocations, but also, you are talking about a process that many of our patients feel when
sure
their
this is
therapist
true.
and analyst doesn't look like them. And they're looking in some ways for a certain type of sameness,
I agree.
for understanding, and so it's interesting. I mean, it's lovely to hear your process, as you move from Rhode Island to Tennessee and back to Boynton Beach and all of that, and sort of feeling held and connected because there's something that supports your sense of being. But what I'm thinking, in terms of this conversation today, is like, what happens when your internal identity as an analyst or person shifts because of all the things that happen outside, COVID, moving geographically, or not knowing a theory, or, as we evolve, I think that there are many ways in which our psychoanalytic identities, without us probably being aware, shift.
Yes.
And just one last thing, there was a time, I live in Boston, and but I'm connected with the Colombian Psychoanalytic Association.
Right. So you're dealing with this in some deep way then.
Well, yes and no. But what I was always aware is, like, I'm considered a woman of color. States. And many people, I had such diverse population that it was amazing. But you know why they came to me? Because I was not white. So there was something about their perception about me for a while. I had one student, because there's a lot of international students here. I had one student from India. And then suddenly I had a bunch of, international students from India. And their issues were very different. But it was something about the perception of me as someone that they felt safe to be themselves, because they thought I wouldn't look at them as an other.
Yes.
So that's
But culturally, Colombia and India are very different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Colombia is a European, another piece of European diaspora.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to do with the geographic and cultural identity. It has to do with the sense of comfort with someone that they feel is like them, in whichever reason. But see, I think what happens is that we tend to think, oh, they're this way, or culturally they're that way, or whatever. But we don't know what they're thinking and what their comfort level is. So I just wanted to point that out, because I was like, oh my God, this is really interesting. Because I didn't know anything about their culture.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, because they didn't experience you as white. That's the thing. May I ask you, Margarita, where had you moved from, and how many moves did you go through in your work life?
Well, I can say that I got my psychology training in Bogota, Colombia.
Okay.
And I feel that I'm back now with this psychoanalytic society that makes me feel at home.
Okay.
Okay. But I trained here. My grad school was in Virginia, University of Virginia.
Okay.
And then I moved to Boston, and my training was at the Massachusetts Institute for Psychoanalysis.
Okay.
Very
Uh-huh.
relational, very relational.
Uh-huh.
And but very relational, but Kleinian too. But there was like a rift because
Yes.
the relationals didn't trust the Kleinians, and the Klein, I don't know why this happens. But the thing is that I worked in a hospital, in Cambridge Hospital, which had, it's not there anymore, the Latino mental health clinic. And we were people from different parts of Latin America. And that really felt like home.
Sure.
And many of us went and had the psychoanalytic training. So, you look at the theories and you feel them, but you always think about this issue of othering, that we're not aware.
Yeah. And interestingly, just as an aside, I'll add here, if I may, I presented at MIP and had a few good friends who were involved in the initial formation of the Massachusetts Institute of Psychoanalysis. And what is interesting, of course, is many of the original founders are people who were unhappy both with the both other institutes in Boston, with
Yes.
Bitsy and with Pine, and
Yes.
formed MIP, and then tragically MIP began to have rifts itself. So what we see over time is that analysts relocate, sometimes within the same city, but from institute to institute, because of various reasons. As Lisha said earlier, the kind of organizational problems that are so common in everywhere, but especially in psychoanalysis. Okay, let's take two more comments, and then I'll talk, and then we'll take a few more comments.
Well,
I'd like to hear. Peter.
Actually, may I say we have three people who have raised their hands. So,
Oh, beautiful. I am loving this.
okay,
I want to hear this. I think it's good for us. So
this is the
if you,
oral history of psychoanalysis, personally and institutionally, and in so many ways. So,
yes.
so let's allow Allison first, then Bess, and then Andrea, and we'll continue for as long as seems.
Yeah. And then I want to hear from you also, because you've moved some.
Well, you'll be hearing more from me when we have uh, our 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 own interview with Let's Talk Psychoanalysis. So you'll get more than enough
Okay.
from me then, I think.
Okay.
Okay, and Allison.
Yeah, I'll keep mine brief because I feel like I'm resonating with a lot of comments already. But maybe the additional angle that I can bring in beyond like stylistic relocation, institutional and cultural, which I feel I've already experienced too in the 4 years I've been interning and now licensed, has been a lot of physical relocations, mostly within the state of Florida for internship sites, what jobs have been available, all the while having a part-time private practice that was mostly telehealth. My Northwestern training was all remote during COVID, and so my internship started all remotely with people in my state at the time, which is Florida. But I moved, up to Chicago to study while seeing those folks down in Florida, and then moved back to Florida, all the way around to various, institutes and rehabilitation centers, and now an office in Gainesville. And now I'm considering another relocation to my own formal physical office.
Hmm.
Um, I think the other angle to add in here has been generational. So maybe you already hear that, like, I started my training in the height of COVID, didn't know it was going to happen, thought everything was shifting remotely. All studies were. Telehealth is almost a default for most people, including workers my age. Though a lot of people are wanting to, patients included, relocate back into the office for work. And I've had to move so much because of the sort of economic issues for young generations, you know, the rent in the area or difficulty finding positions, so on and so forth. And then when it comes to stylistic identity and kind of failing upwards in that way, relocating supervisor to supervisor or therapist to analyst, and how that deeply changed my experience as a patient and then as a professional each time. So there's the age component, and most of my patients who are young, if I say, you know, what brought you to me, what led you to land on my page or reach out to me specifically, a big portion is, well, you're younger, you might understand more of the, you know, developmental disappointments we have. We can't buy a house, right? But we have to move a lot from job to job. And my friends have moved from, you know, state to state or even out of the country to be a digital nomad. And we're all feeling, you know, tossed betwixt and between.
Absolutely.
That is sort of a shared displacement.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that to our attention. You know, I have young kids or younger adults, and they send me articles and I read a lot. Turning 40, turning 30 is so different for this generation than it was for many of us. And they are really living in a very hard world where people come out of grad school and it's really difficult to get a job. And it's not that it was easy for all of us, but it is definitely a different world and the challenges are different. What I'm struck by also, Alison, is that, again, in the span of young life, young professional life, I'm listening to all the changes that you've been through and the various locales and Zoom to, you know, in person, now in person in one office to in person in another office. And all those office changes affect us and affect our patients. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I just mentioned that Allison said in the chat to me that since we're talking about updating our life stories and our relocation histories, that anyone who is a member of the society whose webpage, who's, you know, in our member directory, I should say, needs updating, please take a look at that. I know I need to note the change in my office address. I'll send out a note about that. But so, Bess, you've recently abandoned us here in Gainesville and moved up to New York. So I don't know if that's part of what you want to share with us, but
I'm glad to be able to be still with you virtually. I'm sort of a boomerang New Yorker. I did all my education at New York schools and then did a postdoc fellowship outside of Atlantic City, and then went straight to Florida, Gainesville, where I was for 27 years. And then when my kids had moved up and off to where they wanted to be, I didn't have any family left there. So I wanted to go and live near one of my kids. So when my son settled in New York City, I made sense to me to move back. And I'm practicing on the Upper West Side, which is sort of a spiritual home for me because the White Institute is there. And most of my supervisors in grad school came from there, and some are still around and doing their thing. It's kind of neat. So a couple of things that I've found interesting about the process of relocating and how I decided. I had a really diverse full-time caseload in Gainesville. I had students all the way up to some elderly patients. And a couple of my students were ambitious in a way that took them to New York City, while I was still in Gainesville. And a couple of my elderly patients really needed to relocate to be closer to their families. They were widowed and didn't have really the kind of support in Gainesville. And their families were very far away. In one case, it was in the Northeast, and the other one, her family was on a whole other continent.
Wow.
And she rarely saw them, but there was a lot of homesickness, on both sides. And once her spouse passed away, she had the opportunity to think about actually doing that, but wasn't still kind of didn't have the guts. Anyway, so I sort of partly took a little bit of inspiration, I guess, from my young patients who moved to New York and their stories. And I still see both of them, but now I see them in person now. I've been seeing them virtually for a few years. They come to my office in New York. And then the two elderly patients, I got to say, I was so inspired by one of them because she did a lot of her own moving tasks. They were in their 80s, including hauling stuff to hospice attic and that kind of thing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, maybe to her detriment a little bit, but the energy reserves of some elderly people are kind of amazing to me. And the other one made the move to the other continent a few months back, which was just massive, moving from one country to another when you've been a citizen, in one place and going back. Yeah, that's crazy. But I did ask her to, I couldn't continue to treat her, but I said, just shoot me a short email every now and then. I'd love to hear. And so every 3 months or so, I get a very cheery email. She's very happy to be back with family and doing well. It kind of blows me away. And the other thing I wanted to say was that surprised me. I didn't know who would continue with me, and who wouldn't. And initially, about 90% continued because it's so easy, with Zoom or the phone now. And I was licensed in New York and Florida, still am. The ones that there were a few new patients that I had picked up 6 months to a year before I moved, but I told them, I am going to be going and it'll be up to you if you want to continue or not. So those people largely continued for a little while. And then I think the depth of their attachment wasn't that, that great. And they either took a break from therapy or moved into someone else's practice in person in Gainesville. A couple of people asked me for referrals, and I gave them to names of people in this group. And what I guess the punchline for me was that the two individuals, both men, middle-aged men, who were the most annoyed about me moving, and the most insistent that they would need to probably stop seeing me and see someone in person because it couldn't possibly work, to continue with me virtually. Ended up continuing with me virtually, and they work harder than ever. And they've become really different kinds of patients since we see each other on Zoom now. So I'm still figuring that one out, but yeah, it's been a really interesting process. So thank you.
It sounds fascinating, right? And
Yeah.
so you are one of the people who moved at a time when remote treatment had become the norm, and at least in the states you were licensed in. So you were able to continue with some of your patients, but it's interesting to note also the ones who dropped out and the ones who left, who couldn't, preferred to move to some. Those were the newer ones mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, the ones that dropped out were the newer
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, good relationships, but just not that deep, I think,
Yes, that's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea, you're welcome.
Hi, I'm outside the frame of what you were asking for initially, but this is how I believe it ties in, and I'll try to make my comments brief too. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. My dad took a different job, and I relocated to Miami when I was 15. And we lived on the Miami side, but I ended up going to Miami Beach Senior High because it was more of a white Jewish school versus a school that would have been all African American. Well, when I got there, I did not know anyone. The majority of the students were from New York. They either dressed very sophisticatedly or they were wearing jeans and they were very hip into where the culture was in the 69, 70, 71, 72. What happened was I was completely ignored. No one would talk to me. I did not have a friend the first year. I can still remember walking into the cafeteria and no one said, "You want to sit with us?" Or if I went to sit, "Nope, these seats are taken." So I would go home and cry. Every day I cried, and my parents ignored it. Thank God I got into tennis, and sports became a very big part of my life. When I ended up going in, finishing the doctoral program, and I went to Miami Children's Hospital, what did I want to do? I wanted to work with children, adolescents, and parents because I grew up with very misattuned parents, and I really wanted to help children, especially in adolescents who felt they didn't have a voice, that they weren't heard, that they weren't understood. And I really did a lot of research, and I've written a lot on Eric Erickson's work on the industry versus identity versus isolation, because as adolescents, you're so often judged by how you appear. And because I didn't have a New York accent, I had never been at that age to New York. I didn't understand them, they didn't understand me, and they weren't interested either in getting to know who I was. I begged my parents to let me live with relatives in New York, but they wouldn't. And high school was a very painful time. And I really liked helping adolescents who struggled that didn't fit in. And so up into COVID, my primary practice was working with children, adolescents, parents, and helping in all different areas where children felt they weren't heard, their feelings weren't acknowledged, and nobody gave them an opportunity to be understood. And so I loved what I did. It all changed, of course, with COVID, but I realized how seminal that trauma was because I could almost start crying, reliving what my high school days were like. And I worked so hard, and by maybe sometime in my junior and senior year, I was accepted. I made the tennis team, but it was so much work to have to make friends. And it was really hard. It was very painful.
It sounds like a terrible sense of dislocation.
It was, yes. I hated Florida for years. I really wanted to move out of Florida. I went to the University of Colorado for 2 years, and then my mother pulled me back because she forced me to marry someone I didn't want to. And then when I divorced 7 years later, he knew I wanted to leave, and he put in the divorce decree, you cannot leave the state of Florida. I've learned to like Florida because I can play tennis all year round. But it took me.
That's what we call transformation.
Yes, but it took me years because it was flat, it was boring, it was hot, it was hotter. I missed the four seasons. I thought this was horrible, but I've come to like it. I'm very happy here now.
Thank you for sharing that. See, I think when I talk, I'll talk about this, that what is going on in the therapist or the analyst, right? And how we have to be paying attention to that, even if you're continuing to work with the same patients we were seeing at a different location.
Yeah.
That you have to be very mindful of, are we allowing ourselves to mourn? Are we letting ourselves miss what has been left behind? Because if it gets closed off, or if it's not attended to, then it leaks into the therapeutic space, and it makes it difficult for us to really help our patients more deeply. Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, Peter, what
Yes.
do you think? You want to take a
I think
break?
this is a very good moment to take a 10-minute break, okay?
Great.
So I'll
Wonderful.
pause the recording, I hope, and then let's all reconvene in 10.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I think it's now recording, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Pedro, it's Orostegui. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for
Yes.
having me and inviting me.
Very welcome. You're from Colombia also, I imagine. Yes.
Oh, that's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I imagine, Aisha, you might have something to say to us at some point.
Something, but we'll keep it interactive. Okay.
But I
So
think
first,
that your gift for listening has drawn out from all of us.
yes,
The
and
desire
thank you. I think there's more. There's more.
more.
We
Yes.
we need to hear from you, but I'll definitely share. I want to share some of my thoughts and
But
experiences with you.
we shall turn to you in a moment. But Henry Garcia was saying about his
Yes,
experiences from Bogota,
to Paris. Yeah.
training in Paris. So please.
Oh, sir, but really in Paris, I don't do psychoanalysis. I was in a psychoanalytic institute, but from psychotherapy with young people from 14 to 30 years old. The professor was the professor Alain Braconnier, who is a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst of the, I don't know, in Paris is crazy because you have Lacan, you have the Federation and the Association of Psychoanalysis. Uh, I always work in Colombia. Really, that it was very hard for us is the period of the pandemia, yes. During the pandemia, really, I can't work well. I never stopped my summer psychoanalytic psychotherapies face to presencial, es decir, inside in my bureau. All the patients are happy because they have a certificate that they can go to the physician. Then we work, and patients. For me, it's impossible to do psychoanalysis by Zoom, by Skype. I try, put the camera like that, put your cellular phone like that, but I think is I think is my problem. I don't think that is possible to have a good neurosis of transference in a virtual manner.
Well, that's a very fundamental question, I think, that we may or may not be able to return to today. But John, please continue.
I'm just going to be brief. I would think, it really is interesting that there's such a silence in the literature, because if you think about the history of psychoanalysis, there is this huge history of dislocation in it, right between 1933 and 1945. And so everything that is British psychoanalysis, American psychoanalysis, is the result of this huge dislocation. And yet people managed not to write about it. An anecdote I'm told, and I don't think it's apocryphal, but I have no way of knowing, is that someone asked Helmut Kaiser what had enabled him to do so well in relocating to a new country from Germany. And he said it was owing all to his second analyst. Who was his second analyst? Hitler. And so, I mean, this is something that's in the core of the history of the discipline, never mind all of our personal stories, which I think are fascinating. And I loved hearing, because now I know things about my colleagues and friends in this group that I didn't know before. And
Yes.
that matters to me. But this is the history of psychoanalysis, or a big chunk of it.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why it's all the more surprising.
Yeah.
So when we have some breaks in between, I hope we'll hear from the other people here that we haven't heard from yet. All right. Let me begin with first giving you the background for this paper. And some of you have heard some of what I'm going to share today. Last year, when I gave another paper, which was on, finding the finding of an internal home. And but this paper is going to be focused really mainly on my interest in the relocation of the analyst as it relates to my move from Michigan to Oregon in June of 2022. So it's been 3.5 years now. No, that was a slip. June of 2023. Okay, all right. However, because this was post-COVID, many of my analytic and therapy patients continued with me. But there were profound differences in what happened in those treatments, both because of what was happening in me and not happening in me because of defensive reasons, and I'll come to that. And also because of what was happening in the patients. The background to my move, however, is also not simple, because this is what happened. When we first went into COVID, I had already been doing quite a lot of long distance treatment at that point. I had done a long-term analysis with a patient in India. I was doing analysis with people in South Korea. I was seeing people for analysis in other states because I was licensed in multiple states. But COVID, of course, as happened with all of us, moved all those treatments online for a period of time. And in another paper that was published in the Quarterly, I've talked about the impact of COVID, particularly on treatments, because I've spoken in that paper about how, because I had an office at home, I was able to relatively soon move my practice into my garden. Okay. And so that a few months into COVID, we closed down in about March, and in June, when the weather was better in Michigan, I experimented with putting my couch and an umbrella and a chair, and I tried 2 different parts of the garden, but they didn't feel anchored. So finally, I chose a place on our deck, which was quite private, but which had an enclosure. It had a railing and a railing, and so the couch could go against the railing, and the rest of the setup was the same, but that is where my patients and I felt the most anchored, even though we were outside. And I continue to do that, first with masks and later without masks. So that is a paper in the Quarterly, if anybody would like to read that, and you'd find it easily enough. As I realized that treatments were more and more being done online, and as you know, many analysts actually just closed down their offices and they moved fully on Zoom. Particularly in Michigan, a lot of the senior analysts did that. I think partly because of the worry about COVID, maybe partly for other reasons. that it occurred to me for the first time that I could actually move out of state. I'd never considered it because the idea of giving up a very full analytic practice was very daunting. Okay. And it is something my husband had wanted. It was something, one of our kids was here, the other one wanted to move with us. And suddenly it became possible. But leading up to the change was complicated. As has been written about, and I will read you quotations from about 5 of the papers out of the 20 that I thought were significant, because I thought these 5 were good and relevant. One has to decide, when am I going to tell my patients? So it's generally advised that we tell the patients, the patients should not hear from other people that we are going to be leaving. And so I tried to time it so that I told my colleagues and my patients all at the same time. Very close friends, of course, and family members knew a little bit sooner than that. The period of time leading up to the departure, again, is a matter of personal choice. But in one of the papers, it's written about that it usually takes longer than you anticipate. So whatever your plan is, add 2 or 3 months to that. So I told my patients about a year before the move. And I told them, and I also sent them out an email. I also sent an email to people who I had seen in the past, who from time to time would come back, maybe once a year, or, people I had seen in analysis for 9-10 years and had stopped, but would occasionally pop by. So I wanted them to know as well. Our goal, my husband and I, what we had thought was that we would sell the home we had been living in for about 22 years at that point, where we had raised our children for the most part, and that we would then, because we had to sell a home in order to buy a home here. We are not independently wealthy people, so it wasn't a question of, we would have 2 homes at the same time. So we had to sell a Michigan home in order to prepare ourselves to buy a home in Portland. And at the same time, my patients needed time. So we decided that we would rent in the meantime, that after I told my patients, we would rent for a period of time as we prepared for our move to Portland. So we moved out of the home, which had my office in it. And it's the office, there was an office, a waiting room, it was a whole suite with a totally separate entrance. And that's what most of my patients had been used to, since I think 2000. So, as you can imagine, for my patients, the transference was not only to me, and it was not only to the office space, it was also to the home itself. A second facet that is significant is that my home was located in such a place that it could be viewed as people drove by on a particular street. And many of my patients lived in the area. So it was like a landmark for them. And they could see the home coming and going. They could see it at Christmas with the lights on. They could see it in the fall with the chrysanthemums planted in the front. So these were all rituals that patients had become used to. And they actually started talking about the loss of all of that as I announced the move. My patients therefore had to move from that office to the office in the rental home. And while we were in the rental home, it became very clear to me that I would have to keep coming back for a period of time to see the patients, because the patients were surprised rightly so. They were bereft. And I felt it was my responsibility to come back at regular intervals to see them till they felt that they could also come and see me, which they were not ready to even consider at that point. You know, it was very much the attitude of an angry and disappointed child who, even when it was offered to them, you know, you can always come and see me in Portland, the response was, why will I do that? And that itself had to be analyzed and understood. So we then decided, about 6 months into our stay in the rental home, that either I should get an office. So I started looking for office space that maybe I could use on a sporadic basis. And these are the practical realities on the ground. So the kind of office space that was available was what they call shared office space, where, you know, they said you can certainly come and see patients. You won't have the same office all the time. You may not even have the same office in the morning and the afternoon, because that's how it is, and you can't keep your paperwork here. So I consulted with our accountant. His suggestion was, he said, if you can find a small place where you can stay and see patients, he said, you'd be better off doing that. It would be less expensive for you and less problematic. So we then found a small condo, and where they actually gave me permission to see patients, since they knew what the routine would be, and that, you know, I wasn't going to run a huge business from there. So the patients then moved, as did I, from the rented home into the condo. And there was an office in the condo. Okay. And they began to connect with the office in the condo. Okay. After that was the move to Portland. So when I moved to Portland, we retained the condo for another year. And my plan, as I mentioned last year, initially was that I would go back every 3 months. Okay. And I think I'll tell you more about it. But I felt that was a frequency I could manage, and my thought was that should be okay for the patients. Now, what happened is, when I went back the first time, and the patients had ample knowledge that I would come back, a number of the patients didn't come to see me. So I was sitting in my office in the condo, and having flown all the way from Portland, and I would say half the patients came in and half the patients didn't come in. And the reason they gave for not coming in is, well, you know, we've altered our schedules. We now have patients in those slots that we used to keep for driving to your office. And you're certainly not going to rearrange all of this to come and see you, which of course very much hinted at a lot of resentment and a lot of anger and a lot of hurt, which was very understandable. And it was after that first trip, and I think there was another one between the 3 months because I had to go for something personal. I used to go and stay for a week, but in between I went for just 2 or 3 days. And it was after that second trip, as I was coming back to Portland, that in the plane, it started to come together for me. You know, I started reflecting on what was going on, because I felt I had done all the right things. I had read the literature. I had consulted with people. I had said all the right things. What was it that I was not doing for and with my patients? Because my sense was that their mourning about the move was somewhat blocked, and that a lot of it was being acted out in terms of their not coming to see me when I did go there. And at that point is when I started thinking, and that's why I said, Peter, at the beginning, that I think we have to be very aware and mindful of all the moves that we've had in our lives, because and how we dealt with those. And so in that plane journey coming back from Michigan to Portland, I really found myself thinking about all of that, I was born in one province of Pakistan where my father was stationed as a major at that point. When I was 17 days old, my mother and all of us children moved to Islamabad, the capital, because it was decided by my parents that the two older siblings had had so many changes of schools in the early years that when she got a job in Islamabad, they decided that the children, we would stay with her, and so that the children would have one school they could go to, and my father would commute and come and see us on weekends wherever he was posted. Now, I think personally there were other reasons also that they did that, but that was the reason that was given to us as kids. So we stayed there, and there was the war between India and Pakistan in 1965 when I was 4 years old. And during the war, my mother and all of us, the kids, were told by my father, who was on the front, that we should leave the capital and go stay with some relatives in a more rural area because that would be safer. So that was another minor dislocation, but under very frightening circumstances, as you can imagine. After that, we continued to stay in the capital for a period of time. But then there were 2 or 3 more, as we call them, postings, for the army officers, where we again moved with my father. And ultimately, in 1971, there was the other big war between India and Pakistan, the War of 71. And my father was posted to Dhaka in East Pakistan, which is now called Bangladesh. And he was in the war. And when Pakistan was ordered, the army was told to surrender by General Niazi. He surrendered, and 1 million people were taken as prisoners of war in India. Okay. After that, my mother and all of us kids, by that time there was my younger brother also who had been born while my father was still in Pakistan. So we stayed on in this place called Abbottabad, where, as many of you will remember, that's the town where they found Osama bin Laden later. It's related to the Pakistan Military Academy. It has very good private schools. And then for college, I went 2 hours away, 2 hours driving distance away. And for med school, I went 5 hours driving distance away from home. And then when I married, I moved to the south of Pakistan, which certainly I'd visited before, but which was very different topographically, culturally, than the parts of Pakistan I had grown up in. And, children of army officers are often taught to kind of man up, and you deal with the moves, and the movers come from the military and they pack up all your stuff in wooden crates, literally in a day or two, and you go to your new home, and in 2 days they set up your home all over again. But what is lost, what is felt, as Andrea was referring to in the move, what is it like for the kids to be in a new school and make new friends, is often not attended to, okay? Unless one has extremely sensitive parents, which mine were from time to time, but not consistently. So I realized that in the move, even though I had worked on this so much in my analysis, that in the move from Michigan to Portland, I had done what I had had to do many times growing up. And that, sorry, okay. And that I had not, in fact, allowed myself to really acknowledge how painful it was. And as a consequence, I think that our patients sense that. I think they know when we are just speaking the words, and they know when we are talking the talk and when we are really walking the walk. Okay. So I was talking the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk because I had not allowed myself to feel the pain of that. And that really came to me in those 4.5 hours coming back from Detroit to Portland. And this was in the later part of 2023. And in the week following that, I actually shared that with my patients. Not the whole story of all my moves, but I said that, I've been thinking about what has happened since my move, and I have come to realize that there was something I was blocking out about how painful this move has been for me, and is for me and will be, and the fact that I need to do my own internal mourning. And I said, there's no reason for me to share with you or burden you with all the reasons for that in my personal life, but I want to share with you that I have come to that realization. And I think that it's important for me to let you know that, because I believe that because of my own internal impediment, I might not have been able to really help you get more fully in touch with what you've had to block out about my move. And that was really a very important turning point in the treatment, in all the treatments, because there were treatments where patients had been ready to terminate that had become stalled. There were other treatments that had become more superficial. And across the board, there was, for the most part, real difficulty in acknowledging how bereft my patients felt, even though I was available to them on Zoom. Both, some in analysis, some in therapy. So that despite being able to continue virtually, that the loss was immense. Now, I'll go a bit more into clinical material after a while, but I want to stop and I want to hear from you, and just reactions to what I've talked about, and also if people want to share a little bit more, those who haven't spoken yet, about important moves during their clinical lives.
Thank you. That's so interesting. You shared your personal story with us, but the theoretical dimensions, the clinical dimensions are so.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Peter, did you say I shared my personal story
Yes,
with
a
the
good deal of
patients?
that, yes. And we've done that throughout the meeting, and yet there are the theoretical and clinical aspects.
Yes,
Bring
yes.
into
But
it.
I do want to be very clear that I did not share the details of my childhood history with
I
my
understand.
patients, because
No,
that was really my burden to bear,
but
right?
you've been generous enough to share with us.
Yes, yes, absolutely, yes,
Right.
yeah.
And you've asked people that may not have yet had a chance to join the discussion, especially,
Yes.
would be warmly invited to respond to Aisha, to
Or to share your own similar or different experiences.
well, I Sushil, please.
Yeah, sure. I think I have a lot of mourning to do because I grew up in India and my father was in the forest service and he was transferred every 3 years. So they put me in boarding schools. The first one was in 69.
Mhm.
I was born in 61. And the second one was in 71. And then, of course, I moved for college. Then I moved to Oklahoma, to New York for work, back to Oklahoma for med school, Florida for psychiatry residency, and then 40 miles to my current location. So I did not have any, I had one patient to follow my residency and fellowship. And unfortunately, it only lasted for about a year or so. So I haven't had patients, I haven't had to relocate my practice per se. But I think that every time I moved, the importance of what was going on in the new place was so intense that I think that the morning and the accommodation, everything else was kind of like a byproduct or something that happened in the background. Not that it didn't happen. Um, and so sort of, but I think that probably I still have stuff to work on. And so, but the thing that did strike me was when I moved to Oklahoma, and I was from a middle class family in India. We had a car. Every time we went to the village, people were running behind the car, they would tapping the car, hitting the car. And then I come to Oklahoma and I'm a poor student and I'm sitting on the steps of my apartment complex. I don't have a car, and I see all these people. It's a commuter campus. So I see everybody coming in the morning, everybody go in the evening, uh, and it was such a reversal of my situation.
Oh, where you were the one without the car, right? Temporarily. Yeah.
I take the
You
bus
did.
on weekends, carry both hands with my groceries for the week, things like that.
Yes. Yes. It was a loss, if I may say so. Yeah. Even though it was in the service of a gain, but it's a temporary loss that those of us who are immigrants experience, right?
Fascinating.
Not to speak at this point about my own story, but just listening to the discussion and thinking about all the questions that you've raised, Aisha, and that collectively been thinking about. I mean, I guess most recently I was just thinking about the life of Freud, for example, where he was born in Freiburg, Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, right? At the age of 3 or 3.5, the family moves temporarily to Leipzig, then to Vienna. So his life begins with one involuntary move on the part of his family, where his earliest so-called prehistoric period is sealed off. Then, of course, we know he stayed until 1938 in Vienna and then was forced to emigrate involuntarily to London, where he had his final home, right? So right there, we see something. And then, as John was pointing out, the Second War, forced emigration of so many analysts.
Exactly.
And I think this has been to some degree, for a long time, of course, the death of Freud, the forced emigration, the coming to the new world, the medicalization of psychoanalysis. So many things were kind of buried and not explored really until many years later. But it has been, I think, more recently explored. Emily Kurloff's book, Contemporary Psychoanalysis in the Third Reich, or the books by Aaron and Starr, A Psychotherapy for the People. I mean, this collective trauma of the history of psychoanalysis in some ways.
Yes.
I think we're more mindful of. And it kind of leads me to think that what we're really talking about in a way is a dimension of the trauma theory and trauma history, right? And we're talking about interruptions in the continuity of being, dislocation, right? In all sorts
Exactly.
of ways. And there are cumulative traumas, micro traumas, micro moves. I think you did at one time move from a separate office, moving your office into your home, as I recall, right? Am I wrong? I believe you did, didn't you, Aisha, in Michigan? That at one time you had an office that was not in your home, and then you moved into your home, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, yes. I started out when I was practicing more as a general psychiatrist. I had an
Yes.
office in an office building. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
that's a move, right? And so,
Yes.
and I think we could think about moves that or relocations that are voluntary,
Yes.
voluntary. I mean, that's a variable that's
Ex
important
exactly.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
consider. Um,
Yes.
and then just as I think we can speak of major traumas or major dislocations or relocations, and of course those need to be reflected upon and mourned and meditated. But often a major trauma can overshadow the cumulative micro traumas that
Exactly.
just as damaging. Just as,
Exactly.
just as and to uncover the micro or cumulative traumas beneath the major trauma or major dislocation, I think is
Exactly.
a very important project or task that your approach to this particular issue raises.
Yes. Yes, you're so, so right. Absolutely. Um, and in that context, I want to pick up on the words you used, Peter, because I actually researched. When I started writing this paper, I thought, okay, what is location? What really is location? What locates us? What really do we mean by dislocation? And what do we mean by relocation? We use these words quite freely. So the dictionary actually defines location. One of the definitions is a position or site occupied or available for occupancy. Okay, or marked by some distinguishing feature. So for the analyst, where the analyst or therapist lives and works, and for the patient, that is the location. Okay, dislocation or disruption is of course an act or instance of the order of things being disturbed. Now think about that. The order of things being disturbed, which means again not just the geographical changes, but the minute changes. So, what kind of an office is this compared to the other office? And where are things placed? Okay? And one of the things that happened, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this or will, that as I moved offices and as I kept working with my patients about this, what they would scan the office, they would scan each new office, and part of what they were looking for were some of their favorite objects still there. Okay. For some patients it was, did you bring the gift I gave you? That sculpture, small sculpture I brought you from Africa, did you bring it or not? Okay. And one constant that many patients looked for, because I have always had fresh flowers in my office. So wherever I went, whether it was in person or on Zoom, they would look for the fresh flowers. Okay. And that was very, on people in analysis with whom we start on Zoom and then the patient is on the couch and looking away. So they have only the first glimpse of me and my background, but they would always look at the flowers, which I don't have today. And they would comment on that. It was very centering for them. I want to read you just a few, okay. And then of course the key aspects of relocation, Peter, which you pointed to so well, that it is voluntary and it is involuntary. And that has a lot of meanings. So voluntaries could be for personal choice, education, better opportunities, as some of you have described, career advancement. Involuntary or forced is moving due to persecution, disaster, conflict, or government-led displacement, or resettlement from hazard zones, or ruptures with one's institute or organization, right? There are all of those factors. So, and sometimes it can be combined, that we move for reasons that are both voluntary and partially involuntary, happy and partially not happy. Okay. And as analysts, we have to be thinking about that reality and to be very clear about it. I'm going to read to you just a few beautiful quotes from different psychoanalysts about moves. Ogden writes, every move carries the potential for transformation. both for the analyst and the patient, as they renegotiate their therapeutic contract. David Tuckett, the analyst's physical location significantly shapes the relational dynamics, emphasizing the return of the bodily presence in the analytic space. The focus on the space around the analyst becomes more important, even if it is on Zoom. Jessica Benjamin in 1995, when encountering a new setting, both patient and analyst are compelled to reassess their historical narratives. And I certainly experienced that there has to be a reworking in the analyst's mind of their own history, and only that will allow them to help the patient with what the move means to the patient. Adam Phillips, in his lovely book on kissing, tickling, and being bored in '96, wrote, "Each change in the analyst's location can provide an unexpected lens through which to view transference phenomena." Okay. And I'll share with you a few of the clinical comments that came up, clinical experiences that came up from patients. One patient talked.
Aisha, may I just interrupt you to say we are recording our meeting,
Yes,
and
yes.
it will go up on our website. So I'm sure you'll be sensitive to the need to
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, yes,
All right.
yeah, yeah. I'm going to disguise it. Yeah. So one patient spoke about part of my garden behind the office where blue flowers would come up on the ground cover every spring. And in her mind, it reminded her of the gravesite of her father, okay, who died when she was in her early adulthood. And she had never told me this before in all the years of seeing me in Michigan. But it was towards the later part, after I announced my departure, and before we moved from that house, where I'd been seeing patients for decades, that she said, "It is as though I'm losing my father all over again, that I won't have that hill, that part, which always used to center me." And she actually decided to take a picture of that part of the garden and keep it with her. There were other patients who, prior to my departure, would tell me in sessions that they had come 15 to 20 minutes early, and they sat under a tree in the garden outside the office because they wanted to absorb. They said they wanted to absorb it and keep it in their minds. So, of course, we understand that this was a displacement from me, but it was not only that, because it was also actually the real space of the surroundings they were used to. Yet another patient, in talking about their sadness, sent me a photograph as a text message of a beautiful green leaf with one drop of water on it. And she wrote under that, she said, "That is the only tear I can cry at this point." Okay. And it wasn't until a few years later that she could actually cry in sessions about the fact that I was no longer available to her there in the state. When she sent me that, I said it, you're describing it as if there's a famine of tears, that only one tear is allowed. And she noted that it was because she was afraid that otherwise the sadness would be too much. But it was as a result of the conversations I had with them when I shared that I had realized that I had blocked something out. And I said that I also realized that what I had offered them about coming every 3 months was a rather obsessional device, because I was reminded in thinking about it of one of our, of how the CPAs, the accountants, would come to my office every 3 months to have a discussion with me. And accounting is, of course, a rather obsessional act. So I shared with them that I said that I think that this idea of coming quarterly was a protection on my part. And I have decided that since I left, it is my responsibility to try and come back more often for the first year, because I have robbed you of me and I will make the effort. That is really, and so I started going every 6 weeks. So there was a period of time of about 6 to 8 months where I was going every 6 weeks, staying for a week, and that's when the patients started coming back in person. And in the following year, I then said that I think we can talk about the fact that the plane works both ways. And I hope that you will allow yourself to come to Portland and to see me where I'm living and working now, because I think it will also feel very helpful to you. And a number of them started doing that. And in fact, it was very helpful, because the idea that I had disappeared was altered when they actually could see me in my new surroundings. I want to read to you a little bit I want to offer a few quotes from some of the papers that I think are excellent. One of the loveliest papers that I found on the topic is Daria Colombo's paper published in the Quarterly in 2017. And she addresses, John, what you and Peter were both saying. She says the history of psychoanalysis contains a series of pivotal and much written about geographical moves, from Freud's early childhood journey to Vienna, to the forced emigration and resettling of a generation of European analysts fleeing the rise of National Socialism. And yet, relocation itself, the actual concrete fact of the analyst's move, for whatever reason, has remained relatively neglected. And she raises questions about why the scarcity. She says, perhaps the scarcity is linked to our discomfort in writing about our own difficulties. And yet, of the variety of issues that are challenging for analysts to address, including boundary violations, relocation has received the least attention. It is really remarkable to put in a search and find only 23 papers, and out of them, only 9 or 10 really apply. So one of some older papers about this, for instance, in 1994, one co-authored by Kaplan, Weiss, and Dick, said that they thought that the analyst struggles with defensive self-justification on the one hand and unwarranted guilt on the other when they move. And that is part of why they ignore this and they don't want to write about this. Sherby, who, by the way, is a female analyst who moved from Ann Arbor, Michigan to Florida, and that's a lovely paper. She writes in her paper, even after all these years, I find I cannot write these simple lines without weeping. It's remarkable. And Martinez in 1989 writes, nothing approaching the angst I felt about my move is mentioned in the literature. So that is why I'm saying that this is so very important. paper by Kaplan, Weiss, Harris, and Dick, they refer to the idea that their thinking is that part of what happens when the analyst announces a relocation is that the typical idealizing transference of the yearned for perfect parent, which assumes that the analyst will never lose interest, fall ill, age, die, or move away, is ruptured. The patient may come and go, but the analyst, like the perfect rapprochement or adolescent phase mother, is expected to stay permanently in place. The common but often concealed transference fantasy of unchanging perfection and eternal availability is shattered by the reality of the analyst's decision to relocate, which the patient commonly experiences as a promise broken with connotations of trust betrayed and abandonment. Okay. And that is why I thought that there are certain efforts I need to make, not just in helping people, that the material would follow when certain things in reality were put in place. So they said that patients should be informed as soon as the analyst knows definitely that relocation is to take place. And they're the ones who suggested always add 2 or 3 months to whatever you think is the right time. Now, this is important. Since the imposed termination is a real event, they say that the analyst inflicts upon the patient. We believe that some explanation of its why and wherefore is in order. Okay. Answers may be held in abeyance if the alliance permits, with a promise to reply after the patient's fantasies and feelings about the move have been explained. But in a much older paper written by DeWald, his stance when he was moving was it was to be dealt simply as transference material. So no reason was to be offered to the patient about the move. The patient was to be told about the move and the patient's fantasies elicited and analyzed. That was a much older paper. We have found, Kaplan et al. Say, that many analysts like to keep even the most general reasons for the move to themselves, fearing the patient's negative responses. We feel that this is more likely to foment intense resentment with retaliatory withholding of the very fantasies the analyst seeks to elicit. Excessive analytic secrecy places patients in the position of a child excluded from parental secrets and helplessly subject to parental arbitrariness, a situation incompatible with further analysis. So one more, actually 2 more brief references I'm going to make. One is a very nice paper called Moving Out, Disruption and Repair to the Internal Setting, written by an analyst from England, Marie Bridge. And what she did was moved out of London to what she called the regions. And she describes how in the British Psychoanalytic Society, this was akin to not being an analyst. That if you move out of London and you go to the regions, you're basically abandoning psychoanalysis. And so what she experienced from her colleagues, the work she had to do internally to understand that she was not doing anything wrong. She was moving to take an academic position. And the way she handled it, this was of course also in pre-COVID days, that she decreased the 5 times a week analysis patients she had in analysis to 4 days. And she traveled between the 2 locations for about a year and established 4 times a week analytic patients in the new location and also maintained 4 times a week in London for about a year till she said goodbye to the patients in London and moved there. So as you can hear, I mean, people have done very innovative and curious things. And I think it was definitely much harder before COVID. The person, Linda Sherby, who moved from Michigan to Florida, and this paper was written in 2005, published in, that what she writes about is a very difficult decision she made. She was 21 years younger than her husband, and her husband had a serious spinal issue that would become very bad in Michigan winters. So, unbeknownst to her patients, for many, many years, her husband lived in Florida and she lived in Michigan, and she would commute on the weekends. Okay. Then it got to a point where he developed a heart condition, and she realized that she did not want to be separated from him and wanted to be close to him. It was at that point that she decided to close her practice in Michigan. And the reason she gave her patients was, my husband has a serious heart condition, which makes it necessary for him to be in Florida, and therefore I will move to Florida. And she then writes about her patients' responses, because some of the more savvy patients said things like, I was talking to a doctor the other day, and he said he'd never heard of anything like that, someone having to move to Florida because of a heart condition. And he said he'd have to see your husband's chart to believe that. So as she's writing the paper, which was written, I think, almost 19 years after the move, she said that she still felt guilty about the half-truth she told her patients. And, that the shame that kept her from really disclosing that it was her own need to be close to her husband that was making her move at that point, not his heart condition. Okay. So these are things we just, I wanted to bring to your attention so we can keep them in mind as we think about various ways analysts have struggled with relocation and how they've dealt with it with their patients. And I think we can now open it up for discussion, Peter, if you're okay with that. Questions and discussions.
Absolutely. Again, so much more to think about.
Right, yeah.
Get into the question of self-disclosure.
Well, that's exactly what her paper is titled, Self-Disclosure, Seeking Connection and Protection.
Right. And so this is one example of a problem that arises in any analytic treatment, in a sense, right?
Exactly.
The paradigm for so many issues.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm also thinking about the ultimate, well, the transition or the dissipation of retirement, right? I mean, that is implied, right? Also, of course,
and there are papers about that,
right.
some.
So that's, in a sense, very related to your issue of geographical relocation, right? Then ultimately, illness in the analyst, death of the analyst, all that. And then the last thought that occurs to me is, it's implied, I think, in what we've been saying, but the dislocations and relocations of previous generations in our families that are part of our internal histories also come into it, not just in our own biological lives, but that's, and in our patients, of course, as well. We carry those with us also.
Absolutely. And the whole idea of the illness and the death of the analyst, there's definitely more literature about that, but it is, unfortunately, a lot of it is very sad literature, because it talks about analysts hiding things from their patients and not being able to tell patients up front that I've got a serious condition, or I have a condition and it's not serious, but yes, you're right. And, gaslighting the patients. I mean, some of these papers refer to that material also. And interestingly, there's a paper written by an anonymous person. Okay. And because I think the person didn't want to be named, this was published in the Psychoanalytic Social Work Journal, and it's titled Killing Me Softly, an analysand's perspective on the ethical problems of relocating a psychoanalytic practice. And this person talks about their analyst moving. Okay. This was written in 2001, and how much it affected them. And the fact that, if you're a candidate, you have some support. But if you're a person who's not related to an institute, you have very little support when you undergo something like that. Okay. So I think those are a variety of ways people lose their analysts. So we are just focusing on relocation.
And your reference to the analyst from England, for the longest time, of course, in all of Great Britain, there was only the British Psychoanalytic Society or the Institute of Psychoanalysis. And so, poor Fairbairn living up in Edinburgh or something, right? Or even Guntrip, who was not trained formally in the Institute, right? I mean, so the kind of graphical weight of London in relation to the entire country, and even
yes,
the one institute. So, as Dr. Johnson said back in the 18th century, a man who is tired of London is tired of life, and I think the kind of have internalized, whereas in this country and other countries with institutes, and yes, there's the tendency for psychoanalysis to be urban and Eastern, et cetera. But now really here in Tampa, Michigan, Portland, it's not quite so geocentric.
Centralized, yeah.
Right.
And there isn't quite as much arrogance about one particular place, although there's some, but certainly not as
Then
with
the
the British Psychoanalytic.
cultural surround. And I was just also reminded of the title of Winnicott's paper, The Location of Cultural Experience. In some way, that seems resonant with what we're talking about today.
Beautiful, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Sandra. Hi.
Wait a second. So I thought this is a little bit off of the topic of the relocation aspect of your paper, Aisha, but at first I want to thank you for a very beautiful and extremely sensitive presentation. It was delightful to listen to you. And I just wanted to bring up the aspect of it that reminds me of Mel Slavin's work, where he talks about how the analyst needs to change, and how your clients and their difficulty triggered an aspect of you that had been disavowed, and you were able to reflect on that and really understand your patients on a much deeper empathic level and share that with them. I think that was a beautiful part of this also. Just wanted to mention it.
Thank you. Yes, it's there's a very lovely quote by Ted Jacobs, which has guided me. He wrote, "The analyst's memories have to rise to meet the memories of the patient. And if our memories cannot rise easily, even if they're delayed, they have to rise. And only then can we help our patients with their memories and feelings." Yeah, so thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Marvin, I'm wondering about some of your moves. And would you like to say something about that?
Well, there are a couple of specific aspects about the moves I wanted to bring out. I have kept an office I kept 95% of my Minneapolis patients when I left, and I still have a fairly substantial proportion. When I kept an office there, I still have it. And I went back at first at 1 month intervals, then decreased it. And I still go back now, although as time has gone by, it's less frequent that I need to go back in order to sustain the treatment. But I also have an office in Coral Gables and one here in Naples. I go back to Miami every other weekend because I still have a significant number of patients.
I see.
What I want to say about that is the connection to both analytic institutes that I had at that time and to colleagues was very sustaining and
Yes.
helped me still have some sense of centering my own analytic identity. And I've kept teaching at both places, and analytic colleagues were very helpful because even though the cultural setting was, Miami versus Minneapolis, it was kind of like going to the United Nations in Miami. and uh, I found myself having to ask patients from South America to do things like clarifying idioms I never had to do in the Midwest because I grew up there. So there are all those things that involve
Yes.
my being able to locate myself in relation both to who I had become as an analyst, but also who I was becoming in relation to these changes in the cultural setting, which I thought were very good. The other thing I'll mention is I did my psychoanalytic coursework at the Chicago Institute.
Okay.
Commuted in and out from Minneapolis for about 6 years. Finally, we got an institute in Minneapolis and I graduated from there.
Yes.
But when I came to Miami, I was the only person who had a substantial self-psychology background. While that provided some opportunities to teach, I also now found myself with analytic colleagues who were very warm and welcoming, by the way. But the Miami Institute has a large component. It was a Washington, Baltimore satellite before it became a freestanding institute of classical American ego psychology with now contemporary object relations. And that was another thing that I had to adjust to in terms of how people thought about things, talked with each other about them. All of those things had an impact in terms of also my shifting frame of reference with the different patients. Because some of the patients that I had in Minnesota were much less, because it wasn't quite a culturally diverse a practice. They didn't really care where I saw them. The fact was that I came back. But in Miami, it made a bigger difference because I was having to, I was the same me to Minnesota. Something that felt familiar within my own skin in Miami, which took time. So those are the things that I guess I would bring to the discussion.
That's so beautiful. I mean, you're talking about the analyst's need for a certain space as the analyst grows used to that new surround, right?
I'll just use self-psychology terms. In some sense, my analytic colleagues became mature self-objects that were me. And the risk for me was that I would retreat in all the strangeness of these changes to something less mature, where my need to have my patients reassure me that they were the same so that I could be the same with them and we would be engaged in the same material was something that I tried to keep in my mind. I couldn't always do.
That's really important. Really important. I felt also when I came here to Portland, I'd come a couple of times before. I mean, once to present, a couple of times to see our son who was here. But two or three things helped me, as they do, when we go to new places. I think one of the things that helped me is when I started seeing people who were from here. That helped, because those people bring not only their individual histories, but as it was when I came from, Pakistan to New Jersey to Michigan and then graduated as an analyst, that I learned from my patients in Michigan about the history of Detroit and what is the difference between the east and the west side of Detroit. So similarly in Portland, what is the difference in all the different districts? They're culturally totally different in the city. it also helped me to attend local events where I could meet authors who were from here, who were writing about personal stories. For instance, there are stories related to children who died on Mount Hood. And these are well known to people locally, and I had never known about them. But to actually meet a mother who was an author, who was the mother of such a child, who almost died on Mount Hood on a trekking expedition, and about 11 other children actually did die. To actually meet those people and hear those stories and hear more of the cultural history of the city, to hear the history of racism in Portland, which I had never known about before. So I think that keeps making us feel more comfortable in the new place that we have come to. So I do think that's very important also. Yeah.
Colleagues, maybe from Colombia? Anyone? Fabio.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for the presentation. It's very moving. Since I take that we do not have too much time, I'll try to be brief.
We have 7 minutes, right, Peter?
You're going to address, you already addressed, problem of where the analyst is situated between external world or internal world.
Yes.
The analyst changes the location. Of course, that means some kind of acting in the external world, and is not entitled to interpret anymore that only in transference phenomena. Everybody needs some kind of continuity and stability. And when we receive a patient without words, maybe we establish a setting which doesn't have in its content always how long will this take? How much will this cost? How much time will I be available for you? Will I die? Will I change my country? Of course, virtuality by internet has changed many of those things. We have observed the phenomena of many analysts that come from Venezuela and still see their patients from Europe and from Colombia, or even from the States. But of course, it is a promise never accomplished to be absolutely constant for them. My question is, do you think that considering these variables should lead us to a change in how we pick out the settings initially? But there are many angles from which we can address this, but that would be my question.
Thank you, Fabio. I really have come to feel, and I think this was probably during COVID, that the frame of the analysis actually has to be first in the mind of the analyst. We all know that there are analysts who are in an office, the patient is on the couch, the analyst is there every day, and terrible transgressions have occurred in those treatments, correct? Sexual transgressions, other violations. So the external frame has been maintained, so to speak, but with terrible transgressions despite the presence of the external frame. So I think that for us to have a true analytic attitude and maintain that as the way, as the thing that structures the treatment, to me is the most important thing. And, for me, an analytic attitude implies that we are two people embarked together on helping the patient do what the patient cannot do alone in terms of thinking about their mind. Now, whether we do it on Zoom or whether we do it in the same office for decades, it's different in each situation. But I do believe that if that is the attitude the analyst is carrying, then analysis can be carried on, whatever the geographical location. I'm not denying the fact that, to have two people together is very different from two people remotely, because I feel that when my patients come and see me, and I go twice a year only. But when we are together, I feel as though a new life is injected into the analysis. So that I do feel that when we are doing remote work, that it's really important, if we can, to try and have in-person meetings in between. I don't know if that answers the question you were asking entirely, but I answered it as I understood it.
Well, we're almost out of time.
Okay.
I'm afraid, Henry, we won't be able to have a further discussion today, but I'm hearing my own. But I think as a tribute to Horacio, I would like to extend to all the colleagues from Colombia invitations to attend the rest of the meetings that we will hold this year.
Oh, that's beautiful.
In his honor and his memory. Okay. So thank you for
coming. You so much. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm reminded of what my good friend and colleague Franco Borgogno from Torino says, that we come from afar. I come from afar, vengo da lontano, right? And we encounter the other from a distance. From a distance, don't we? Inevitably. And sometimes when we think we're similar, we're actually more different because we don't see the profound differences that are obvious sometimes when we see people from other ethnic or other backgrounds. I'm also thinking of the dislocations in the course of training, actually. Marvin, you brought this up. I've had that experience. Michael Parsons has written about the internal analytic setting, Aisha, if you're familiar with his work. And I'll just close by saying that it's sometimes said that we all write one book in the course of our lives, no matter how many titles we've published. And I think you've just rewritten The Rupture of Serenity, External Intrusions and Psychoanalytic Technique.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
And if we
Thank you so much.
If we can now become co-authors of your book, we would be so delighted and honored. Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank
you so much to all of you.
Okay. We'll hope to meet again. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you. Bye.
Fabio, thank
Thank
you.
you for the invitation.
All right.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Great
Thank you, Henry.
presentation. Thank you. Thank you all.
Goodbye.
Ciao.
Thank